Hello everybody, we have another game with the black pieces against Rawborn. He's rated 943 and he goes e4. We're going to play c6, which attacks the center. Try the first two moves of the Caro Kann. It creates a pawn chain on the light squares, which is basically trying to just have a pawn presence in the center that's solid. That's all it is. Okay, so white decides to develop his knights instead of taking the center. This attacks my pawn one more time, but that's not a big deal. So what do we want to do? We're going to take this pawn. We're going to trade our strong pawn for his strong pawn. This brings his knight into the center, which then allows us to develop quickly with tempo. So we develop our bishop, right? And we attack his knight for free. So now he has to move his knight. He might move it here and attack our bishop for free. So that would be good. That's a good idea for him because then he gets the turn back. Whereas if he just defends it, then we get the turn. But if he attacks our bishop, then we have to move our bishop. He gets the turn. So he does it and we simply drop back. Now our bishop is vulnerable to an h4, h5 pawn advance. But okay, so white starts by developing his bishop, pressuring our king a little bit. We want to develop our bishop anyway, so we're just gonna go e6, open our bishop, control the center, kind of block this bishop a little bit with our mini bishop. The pawns are mini bishops. And this is like the start of a Caro Kann game. We're going to develop our knights to the normal squares. And our position looks like a Scandinavian, you know, Queen d8 version. But if you look at white's side, it looks nothing like a Scandinavian, and then it looks like we've been playing a Caro Kann. Okay, so white's thinking. Okay, so he does put a pawn in the center. So far he's been playing very well, very principled. Pretty good actually. I'm just going to develop a minor piece towards the center. Can't be a bad move. And ask white what he's going to do. He's playing very well. If he goes h4, little sus, but he doesn't. Okay. Bishop e3, developing a piece towards the center, principled, very nice. We're just going to develop our last knight to its most reasonable square, of course, because its best square is not available. So now we have homes for these minor pieces. We just need to find a home for our bishop. If you try to go here, he'll probably solidify his pawn chain for free, so we don't want that. Okay, so he moves his bishop. Didn't he just move his bishop? He literally just put it on e3. He could have gone to g5 last turn in one move, but instead he went e3, then g5, which is crazy. So that's a free turn for us. Fine. What does this do? Pins the knight, but no big deal. I wanted to develop a piece and I guess get out of this pin for free. Boom. His king is still in the center, so I get a free check. I get to remove the pin and develop a piece for free. He decides to block the check with c3, solidifying his pawn chain. The difference between this and the bishop check is c3 would have been hitting the bishop. Here, it's not hitting the queen, so we get the turn back. Okay. Also, it secretly laterally hits the bishop, which a lot of players miss. So that's important too. So we need to get our bishop in the game somehow. We have some squares. It's kind of loose on d6, so just for you know, solidity, bishop e7 looks like a nice square. And now we have ideas of h6, maybe h5, castling, c5. we'll see what happens. But our position's nice. It's a very simple, solid setup. It's kind of passive. That's why I don't recommend it as your main opening. But a lot of people like the Caro Kann because it's a little, it's kind of easier to play sometimes. I mean, it's not easy to play. It's just it's simpler for a lot of people who don't want to like put too much into chess. Like it's just easy to play, but it's those are the same people who aren't going to get great results. Like at the 1500 up to 2000 range, it's going to be very hard. He moves his bishop again. He just keeps moving it back and forth. He eyes my queen, but his bishop's in the way of his pawn, so he can't even discover me. So he's just moving his bishop around. And what does this do? It gives us free moves, right? So let's castle with that free move. And look at this construction. Our king is safe. Safe to say. And okay, so he's just trolling me. He's just moving his bishop repeatedly. But this allows me to improve my knight for free. I can go here and attack his bishop. But in the Caro Kann, and similarly in the Slav, you try to break with e5 or c5 if available. He just put this here, which stares at the c5 square. So we can actually try to break with e5, which I like a lot. And you always have to consider if they push past, what would happen. Well, we could take that pawn, and if he took back, that piece would hang thanks to the queen. At any moment, he can throw in his queen tempo on b4. So you have to be careful about that. But it looks fine. So what do we want to do? Do we want to throw this in? Where would his bishop go? Maybe here. And then c5. But then d5. Now let's just play e5. There's no reason for fanciness. We want to break with e5 or c5, which deconstructs, which takes our passive our passive position, which we're only using 3 rows, and tries to break open this position so that I move something to the 4th rank and I challenge his thing on the 4th rank, right? So he is counter-striking me here. Very weird move to see. You can do something like queen c7 supporting the center. But I wonder if I could just sack my bishop. You know, it looks kind of nice. If he takes, I take with check. His bishop's hanging. So let's go for that. Even if we didn't get the bishop back and we just sacked our bishop for 2 pawns, it still looks kind of fun. You know, you have this coming. This. Yeah, I mean, it looks interesting. But now the bishop is loose, and that's why you can't have too many loose pieces. You have to watch out for checks. And again, none of this would be possible if he was just castled. Just castle, guys. Just castle. Nike should sponsor me. Instead of just do it, just castle. You're welcome. Okay, so now this guy's realizing what has happened. There's no way he considered that sacrifice. And we have beautiful minor pieces. He takes, but now we take with check. His bishop's hanging. However, he defends. He'll have to defend with the knight in order to protect the bishop. The knight will be pinned in turn. So it's a very interesting position. Okay, so we don't get the bishop. We're stuck with the 2 pawns, but I don't mind that. Like I said, looks like a lot of fun. Hitting the bishop, I mean, what does it really accomplish? Goes back here. Do you have anything there? Not really. so I'm not going to waste my time doing that. If you take this pawn, it forces bishop to take. What is the point of that? Well, the only point would be to open the e-file, which is where his king is. That looks kind of nice. So let's go for that. So now we're down a dark squared bishop, right? But we're not going to cry or panic, right? We're going to bring a rook to the open file, right? We have this nice bishop just slicing through his position. The rook, the queen, and now he just keeps bringing his knights back, right? To protect, to protect. Now both of his knights are pinned, absolute pins. So now I could kind of just have fun. This knight was protecting this square, so now it's not. So now I'm gonna hop my knight in here, which I couldn't before. I mean, I could have before, but it would have been in trade. Now my knight can stay here, attack this knight, which is pinned. So when I take the knight and he takes back, the bishop is undefended. So right now this is threatening to win the bishop if you connect the dots, right? Now if you don't connect the dots, it looks like this move has nothing to do with the bishop, but you have to connect the dots in your head. Okay, so he kind of saves the bishop, but does anyone see the problem with that? Well, is there a problem with that? I think this bishop is loose, unless I'm crazy. His knight's defending it, but there's this discovery x-ray. So you have weird moves. How do we... Look, what's the right way to take advantage of this? What if we take a piece, and then he gets a queen? And then we go check. So we get a piece, he gets a queen. We go check. I don't think he's going to move his king. What if he just puts a piece here? Well, then you take the queen, and I mean, we could try that. It looks fun. What else looks fun? If you start with this one, he'll take a piece, you'll take a piece, and what's the point? I mean, you could just keep adding pressure, you know, and just see what he does. That's interesting. Just start attacking stuff and see how he responds. If you take this, he takes this, and then the bishop's defended. Although even there, like, this rook's coming here, his position's so bad. What do we want to do? There's this move too. Huh. There's just a simple developing move, which is strong. Let's just bring a rook in. You have tactical stuff that win, but I mean, this is good enough. When you keep adding pressure like this, your opponent inevitably will collapse. I mean, even this, he's lining up, so now there's even more discoveries. It looks pretty bad. I'm gonna just do something crazy and sack my queen. I'm gonna take his bishop because I just think that I have really good development. And so he does take my queen, but I'm gonna check him. This threatens the queen as well as the rook, and my rook is staring at his knights. And so right now he's up a queen, and I only have two pawns for it. So let's see what happens. These are fun games. Chess is about winning, not about counting. So he blocks backwards with the knight that just took the queen instead of forwards. I think forwards was a better try because if I take with the pawn, I'm blocking my rook. Now, if I take the knight, he'll get a rook. This. It's a lot of trades. It's kind of eh. So what I'm going to do instead, you could of course take the queen. Should I take the queen though? Fine, I'll take the queen. Yeah, I think you could have also taken the rook, but this is fine. So we got our queen back, but they're about to take a piece. So now instead of 2 pawns for a queen, it's 2 pawns for a knight. But there's a lot of pressure here. His king is stuck in the center. How do we utilize this? Well, his knight's pinned. Can we add pressure to it? This adds pressure. This adds pressure. This can be stopped. This cannot be stopped. How does he block it? He can't help with the rook. He can't castle. These pawn moves don't protect the knight. The only way to protect the knight would be bishop c4, protected by the knight, but the rook can take with check there. And the bishop doesn't touch the square, so now we get our piece back, right? And we have the attack. So that's the whole point of sacking a piece for 2 pawns. It's so that one day you can recapture with the initiative. He does find this move, which is insane, but kudos to him. So I'm just going to take the piece, and now he's forced to move his king, which walks into checks. The thing is, if I take his bishop, he takes my bishop, and I get a pawn. We could do that. Oh, but what I was gonna say is, when he moves his king, I could also take his knight, and if he takes my rook, I take the bishop, 2 pieces for a rook. So let's go through this game. This is center, development, center, development, and now we have it's kind of forced. It's forced in the sense that you can't play e5, which would otherwise be like a desirable move. You could push and lose your pawn, so you can't push. You don't want to play e6 and block in your bishop. If you just develop your knight, he's gonna push, so you don't really have like moves that make sense until you get rid of this pawn, and then you can develop. So we take the pawn and then develop center for free, but he counters us for free, so it's not for free, so it's a forced move. And then center, development, and somewhat forced, because if you don't do this, he's going to end up coordinating and it's going to be hard for you to defend. And then development center, development center, development center for free, right? This touches the center. Development, king safety, move 10, and everything I did was forced, or the list you see on the screen. King safety, and pawn break, center, and development. Because if you stay with this pawn structure, he's always going to have all of this room, 4 rows, and attacking your 5th row. Meanwhile, you're on 3 rows defending your 5th row. So by pushing in this, like right now, your rooks can't get in the game until you open a file. The only way to open a file is for a pawn break. That means the pawns need to meet. That's either C or E attacking this, and when those pawns trade, you'll have open files somewhere for the rooks. And also, that would release the knight from its cage and the bishop. So it will increase your development, and it will give you space. It will give your rooks space to operate, and it will take away his d pawn, and his d pawn is taking away space from your pieces, right? The second that d pawn goes, your knight has these squares. So does your bishop, so does your queen. So we hit it, and then just tactics, because we recognize that it's hanging, because we do puzzle rush. And even though you don't win the bishop, if I click on analysis board and if I put on the engine, even though we're down a piece, it's completely level, which means, I mean, it even says black is just the tiniest tinge better, but what that means when you're down a bishop and the computer says equal, that means you have like something really good going for you. It compensates you for a bishop, so there's some nice attack, some nice initiative that you have. Okay, so let me turn that off. Yeah, so then we just open the file, and there's our initiative. Okay, so he's up this piece, but then we just increase pressure, threats right away, and then we increase development, and then we do a queen sack in the knowledge that his king isn't going to go anywhere. Everything's hanging. At the very least, I would just get my material back. You know, no one would want to be white here. And so this is the game. And again, it's move 21. This guy's not castled. He never gets to castle. Just castle. Before you do other stuff, castle. And the game's over. So hopefully this helped. Castle your king. Or else. Subscribe. Goodbye.